I'm Joe Kane.
I'm Dan Kane.
I'm Sal Conca.
And I'm Wayne Heckler.
And this is the Imperfect Podcast.
Don't forget to check us out at hecklerkane.com and everywhere on social media.
To the bumper.
Oh! So guys, how cool is this? Today we have a really awesome guest, Michael Price. I know you probably have never heard his name before, but you've definitely seen his work. He has written for The Simpsons. He's an Emmy Award winner. He co-wrote The Simpsons movie. He's been with them for 13 seasons, which is clearly a career. Yeah. Not only that, he's now writing F is for Family, which is a Netflix animated series, and he's co-producing that with Bill Burr. So that's really cool. And then for us Star Wars geeks, holy shit! This guy also wrote Lego Star Wars.
Yeah, I mean, my son. I actually said to my son today, I was like, I'm going to be interviewing the guy later on tonight who writes the Lego Star Wars, and he's like, oh my god, he's like, this is so awesome. He's like, my son's 4, and was so excited that I'm going to be talking to the Lego Star Wars guy, and in my head, all that's buzzing around is going Simpsons.
I know. We're it's like we do the pre-interview questions, and we're like. Every one of them, I was like, Simpsons. I was like, oh no, I'm going to have to ask him other shit. Like, we're going to have to ask him other questions.
It shows us our age growing up with The Simpsons. It was so dominant in our lives. It was a pioneer in many ways.
I know. I mean, all through college. I mean, I was an avid watcher just my whole life. One of the first Halloween parties I ever went to, you dressed as Homer and your wife dressed as Marge. So, that was really cool. But
we changed out every single picture in the house with Simpsons photos as our Halloween decorations.
Like that was your family.
That was our it was our family.
So. It was pretty badass. It was like walking into the Simpsons house for your Halloween party. It was pretty cool. It was pretty damn cool. I have to give a special shout out in how we came to get this guest. Juliet Miranda, who does the Unwritable Rant, she's been really friendly to us. She's part of the Pottern family, which we're also part of.
And we could say cheers to her too.
Yeah, cheers. We don't have any bourbon or wine tonight, but we love you and thank you so much for introducing Michael. So you guys ready to talk to him?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Michael, welcome to the Imperfect Podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Hey, Michael. Yeah, glad to have you. We have so many questions, so hopefully we'll get to all of them.
I mean, a writer of Simpsons, that's the first thing that comes to mind.
I know, right?
You're doing a lot, but wow.
And
I want to start with this. Let me say this. Simpsons was such a groundbreaker for the time. It was before anything like this. You set the tone for Family Guy. I mean, that's very exciting. You guys did great there. I mean, you're a great writer, sort of episodes that you wrote, you're co-producing. I'm just very excited. I think you did great work here.
Cool.
Oh, thank you.
So there's no actual question. He's just buttering you up.
Well, Michael, I think what we're trying to say is we're all actually big fans. As you can see sitting out in front here, this Homer has been actually in the shot in the background, hanging up behind my guitars back there, since the inception of the Imperfect Podcast. So it's been a part of our set here, and we just decided to bring it out and stick it out front.
Center stage
for you.
Yeah.
Just for you.
I mean, without Homer, and none of us would be here.
Exactly. Well, let's dive into you a little bit. And, so yes, we know you write for The Simpsons and you've written a lot of cool stuff. You mentioned you're from Jersey. How long have you been writing, though, and what was life like before The Simpsons?
Well, I've been writing professionally. I got my first job as a writer in 1993. So I'm going on like 24 years. I got my first professional job. But before The Simpsons, I grew up in central New Jersey, fairly big Irish Catholic family, 4 boys. I was a complete and total TV kid. Like all I did was watch TV. So, growing up in like the 70s, you guys are in New York. So all I did was watch like Channel 5, Channel 11, Channel 9, mostly Channel 5, Channel 11. Like Bugs Bunny, Bugs Bunny would be on every day at 3:00 when we get home from school. So I watched those religiously, and then we switch over to Channel 11 for like Batman and
DuckTales or stuff like that. Or is that...
I'm a little past DuckTales.
You're a little past that. Okay.
A little past my time, but like all that stuff, and old movies and all those channels. Back in those days would just play like old like W.C. Fields movies and Marx Brothers movies and Abbott and Costello and like the Bowery Boys and all those things. And I just ate all that stuff up. I loved it. I didn't know anything about like how you went about doing it. I just thought it was great. I have this kind of a head for remembering little trivial things. So I got into like learning the names of actors and stuff like that. And I never thought it was going to lead anywhere. And then I went to college in New Jersey, and I went to graduate school for theater, and I knocked around doing a bunch of different things. And then I sort of discovered that I really enjoyed comedy, and I enjoyed doing like performing comedy. And I got involved with a sketch comedy, improv sketch comedy group in the city, in New York City, called Gotham City Improv. And that's where I first started like figuring out like, oh, okay, this is a thing that I could actually, kind of do. And long story short, that's where I sort of, the training there sort of teach you to sort of do improvisational kind of theater games, which develop your sort of sense of humor on stage, being spontaneous. And then they would tell you like, okay, you came up with a really funny thing during this improv, like now go home and like write a scene for that character that you came up with on the spot, and then that's how you learn to sort of take a spontaneous idea and then go home and like write it and turn it into a scene. So that's what's sort of teaching me what writing is about. And I hooked up with a partner. We wrote a bunch of stuff together, and we decided to sort of be like a two-person act. And we made a show together that we wrote, and we sort of played it all around New York City. And some people who were interested in us, like from the industry, saw us and said, "You should come out to LA and like showcase it in LA." So we kind of said, "Okay, let's go." So we quit everything, threw everything in a car, drove out to LA. This is like 25 years ago now, like the 92. And knocked around here for a while trying to get something going, and we eventually got a little bit of taste of stuff and got an agent from that. And that's the hard part, is getting an agent. And through that, we ended up splitting up our team, but I ended up sort of like writing. What you do is you write what are called spec scripts, which are like, you write like sample scripts for shows that are on TV at the time. So like back then I wrote like a Murphy Brown, what else? Coach, all those shows.
Oh yeah, all those classic sitcoms. Did you do a Full House or?
Not a Full House, no. But one of my high-powered agent, got me. He represented the guys who were the head showrunners of Full House at the time. So he got me an interview at Full House to try to pitch them to try to write like called a freelance episode, because there's like writing staff, and they write most of the episodes on a show, but then occasionally they'll hire like freelancers to write one. So they were looking. So I came in with all these stories. But it was like season 10 or something of Full House. It had been on for a long time already. So every story I pitched, they'd already done or whatever. So
how about this idea? No, done it. How about this one? No, done it.
It was all that. And they filmed at Warner Brothers Studios in Burbank. And I didn't know where to park, and parking is difficult there. And I parked on their New York City street, their back lot, which actually I think was like the place in the Batman TV show when they would pull up to like Gotham City Hall and run up the stairs, that big column.
Yes.
I think it was that place. So I parked my car right in front of like Gotham City Hall and walked to this meeting. In the middle of the meeting, someone said, "Do you have I had a really crappy car. Do you have this car out there?" I was like, "Yeah." They're about to tow it. So that's how my meeting ended. But eventually I did get some work, and my very first job was on this sketch comedy show that was called The News, NEWZ. It was like a low budget version of Saturday Night Live, kind of a Saturday Night Live knockoff. But it was my first job, and it led to watch.
I can't help noticing that he has made like 5 Batman comments. Are you a Batman fan?
I see the Joker back there behind you.
Yeah.
I love old Batman, Adam West Batman.
Sure.
Like that came on when I was a kid, So like I was so into that show. I loved it so much. My friends in the schoolyard. Because it used to be on 2 nights in a row. The original show, when it came on, it was on Wednesday night, and they'd have the little cliffhanger, and then it'd be on Thursday, would be the second half. So on Thursday morning, in like first grade, all we could talk about was like, how's he gonna get out of it? What's he gonna do? They're in that giant ice cream cone, like that the Riddler put them in, Mr. Freeze put them in. How are they gonna get out? So yeah, totally into that. I never read the comic books. I enjoy going to see the new movies. The new ones, the Ben Affleck ones, I'm not too crazy about, like Batman versus Superman. I don't like the kind of dark Zack Snyder version of Superman and Batman. But the Adam West Batman, the greatest thing ever.
You're into the classics. You like the Three Stooges. You like Adam West. You know.
I remember those days so clearly in school. Same exact experience with that. I was waiting there.
Yeah.
And it's great. And it's funny that you're from Jersey, so you do know the same channels, like you were saying. So we really connect here with the same exact shows at the same time.
Right.
There wasn't that much to offer. There was no cable. That's all. You had a few choices. So it's great. I love the same influence you had.
The greatest thing ever they had was that thing called TV Picks. Do you remember that?
Yes. Is that the game show with picks? Picks?
Yeah,
yes.
Picks. It was in the early 80s, late 70s, and it was this like really rudimentary video game where a kid would call in, or like they'd call you, like you'd send in a postcard with your phone number, and they'd call you from Channel 11, and you'd play this game called TV Picks. And like a thing would go across the screen like a little thing, and you'd say Picks. And it would make the thing shoot, right? And if you got three of them, then you won a prize. And then until some kid realized, like that every kid who plays a video game now realizes that if you just hit the button 1,000 times, like it'll get it. So the first kid who did it, he just went like picks, and he won. That was basically the end of the game. But,
that's
great.
funny.
I remember that so great. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, it was great.
Interactive television.
It was before its time.
I didn't go outside or play. I didn't go out and play. I didn't have a life. I just watched TV. So luckily it prepared me for a career, but I didn't realize at the time.
It paid off, most certainly.
That's funny. So you're out there, you're writing for some shows like the news and getting some gigs. The Simpsons come calling, or do you call this? How do you get that gig? What's the meeting like? How does that happen?
Well, this is a story that I tell a lot, but because it's sort of like the story of well, I'll tell you, because a lot of people ask, like, how do you get started? Like, what do you do? Mm-hmm. And I always say, like, just try anything, take any opportunity. You never know where it's going to land. So I've been knocking around. I got some work here and there, and I finally got on my very first sitcom. Was the show that was on 20 years ago now. It was on the old UPN channel, which was, I think, was Channel 9 in New York, and it was called Homeboys in Outer Space, and it was about these two guys in space. It was really dumb. It was really funny. It was really silly, and it only lasted one season. And it's still kind of like a joke, like a punchline, in like TV circles. But working on that show were a lot of great writers, and working on that show as consultants, meaning they only worked 2 days a week, were Al Jean and Mike Reiss, who had been on The Simpsons, were the showrunners of The Simpsons for a couple of years, then created The Critic. And then after The Critic went off and had like an overall deal at Disney where they were creating shows. And I got to know them there. And then the very next year they created their own show for ABC, which was called Teen Angel. And they hired me on that show. And then after that, they worked on another show they worked on them with. And I got to know them through that. And eventually they went back to The Simpsons, where Al Jean went back and became like the head showrunner of The Simpsons again. So he already knew me, and we'd worked together. So like 5 years or so, or 4 years after Homeboys in Outer Space, we'd worked together a couple of times. I was on this whole other show that was about to get canceled. And he called me out of the blue and just say, like, I'm back at The Simpsons. We have an opening. Are you available? Would you like to be on The Simpsons? So I was like, yes, definitely. The show's about to get canceled. He goes, well, let me know if it does. And so then I started kind of praying for that show to get canceled, because it was going to get canceled. And then it did. And then I called him up and he's like, yeah, so they hired me. That's how I got hired on The Simpsons. But it always, like, you never know, like, what show or what job is going to be the thing that will help you meet somebody who will help you 5 years later.
The Simpsons have already been going for so many years
Since
at that point, too. Jumping into something like that, is that something that makes you nervous? Because now you're going into a show that, hey, how much longer of a run? I mean, who knew that it would take you another 14 years now at this point? Further,
15 years.
How do you look at that?
I wasn't thinking about. I'd been on. All I had been on at that point were shows that lasted like half a year, or like I was on one show that lasted a full season. So to be on a show that I knew would be on at least 2 years, I was like over the moon, and to be on The Simpsons, which is still the greatest show ever, and especially back then, was coming off its heyday and was still, such great writers, and to go into that room with these people, I was just unbelievably thrilled. It was a very daunting experience, because when The Simpsons started, I watched it quite a bit. I really enjoyed it. I always admired it, but there were a couple of years there where I was busy, working on other things, and I got married. I had a young son. So, and this was before the days of TiVo and stuff like that. So I missed entire episodes. I would watch it whenever I could, but like I didn't know the show as super well as I know now that I'm working on it. So the first day I went in there was it was close to 15 years ago right now. It was December of 2001. And I went in there and all these guys were there who I knew their names and I admired them so much. Like guys like George Meyer, were there, and John Vitti and Al Jean and Mike Reese and all these amazing writers. And I was very intimidated by them. And there were names of characters that I didn't really know who they were. Like talk about Gil, old Gil, like Bill.
Yes.
Like I didn't know who he was. They talk about. I was like, oh yeah, Gil, but I had no clue who he was. Or even like, I'm going to sound like an idiot now, but I didn't know like Homer's friends Lenny and Carl, like what their names were. I just knew there was like Homer's two friends, and so.
Don't ever show up at Comic-Con and tell anybody that.
No.
They'll run you out of there.
and there's a guy that's called, the very first show I was working on, that very first day was the one that turned out to be the 300th episode. It's where Bart sues Homer to be his own kid, Emancipation, and he goes and ends up living in this loft with Tony Hawk and all the skateboard guys.
Yep.
So they were writing the scene in the courtroom, and they were talking about, well, who should Bart's lawyer be? And one of the guys, this guy Ian Maxstone Graham, a great guy, he goes, well, I think it should be Burns' lawyer. And I was like, well, why would it be Mr. Burns' lawyer? He's like, no, that's what we call the guy. But that's what they call that guy who other people call the blue-haired lawyer, the guy who looks like Roy Cohn. The guy's like, Mr. Simpson. So, but his official name in the writer's room is Burns' lawyer. Okay. So, like, I had to learn all these things, Yeah, so,
sure. The character list, like, how deep is that character list?
Oh, it's hundreds.
Right.
Hundreds.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's a big poster on our wall, like these posters that the show puts out. There's like one of like all the characters all lined up, and so sometimes like if we're thinking of something, well, it's like all just sort of stare up and look at that wall and like, oh yeah, how about that guy? Like, excellent. Well, that's what we'll remember. We'll remember that there's Leopold, the guy from Superintendent Chalmers' assistant, things like that.
But that's just the reality of writing. I mean, when you're working on this show, you're going to really know the show. But when you're first getting on your first part of it, you're not going to remember every single character because your mind is focused on other projects. Oh. But that's great. I mean, look how far you've come. Now you know them all practically.
I do know them pretty well, and I have a pretty good memory, like I said earlier. So I seem to remember like shows from 15, at least all the shows that I've worked on. I have a pretty good memory of someone say like, when did we do that thing? I was like, oh, that was this show from 8 years ago.
Do you get any leeway to invent your own characters by any chance, or have you invented any characters that are?
Yeah, I have. Show? I mean, I've come up with a couple of characters that have gone on, but none of them are like as immortal, as like Gil or anything like that. But the one character was based on a gym teacher I had. Is this guy called Coach Krupt, and he's the really mean gym teacher who just throws dodgeball bombardment balls at the kids.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So that's my guy. So whenever he shows up, you get, because the Writers Guild has a stipulation. If you create a character like that and he appears in a show, the first time he appears is in a show that you wrote, then every time that guy shows up and says a line, you get like $200. So I get Coach Krupp the money.
That's great. That's great.
And then there was an episode with Krusty. With Krusty like exploiting Cletus's kids to be like singing stars. So we came up with all new names for Cletus's kids in that episode. So there's all these like Cletus kids that sometimes show up that are mine, like W. There's one called W. There's one called Birthday. There's one called International Harvester and things like that. So sure. those are my characters.
There you go. That's good stuff. So, I mean, you were talking about, we said like Full House, for instance, right? You go in, you pitch all these ideas. The show's been running for so long, everything's been done, right? Same problem with The Simpsons. I mean, what do you attribute to the longevity? How do you guys keep it fresh? Is it just a factor of because the characters don't age, right? It's this elastic time warp that you guys kind of play in?
Yeah, I think that's one big part of it. I mean, again, I started whatever it was, season 13 or season 14, so the die was already cast long before by all the great guys who started the show, like Sam Simon and Matt Groening, of course, is still there, and Jim Brooks. Al and Mike and the original writers, but they created this like vast world with all these characters who don't age, which is great, and it's also great that they don't really learn anything. So that, in the course of an episode, maybe they learn something, but then everything goes back to the way it was, which is a great a great way for for that show to work. And so it just keeps, even though they never age, we sort of keep moving forward in time. So we're now doing stuff about what's happening in the world right now. So that I love that part, that it's always happening now. And I know there's some shows where some super fans have been very upset about shows that sort of messed with the timeline. Like, for instance, there's a show that my friend Matt Selman wrote about 10 years ago now, that was called That 90s Show, where Homer got involved in the kind of Nirvana style grunge band called Sadgasm. And it was all 90s because it was positing that at that time, when that show was written, was like 2006 or 2007, Bart was born in 1996. So then Homer and Marge were young and in their early 20s in 1991. So in that version of the show, that took place in the 1990s, where in the earlier episodes, they were high school in 1970. So I just love that it keeps always going forward, and we're always sort of reflecting what's going on in the world right now. So there's always new stuff to find, new stories from that.
On a personal note, what's your favorite Simpsons character to write for?
Well, as a matter of fact, it's Krusty, and I'm writing a Krusty episode right now. I pitched a Krusty episode last week, and it went over well enough that I'm in the middle of writing it right now. I can't really tell you what it's about, but I just love Krusty, because going back to what I talked to you about earlier about how I loved watching all those old movies and W.C. Fields and Marx Brothers. I love old show business, and so Krusty embodies all of that. All that.
He's the vaudeville king.
Yeah. So I love him. I love him so much, and I had that one show. I wrote the one where Cletus, like I told you, where Cletus's kids and Krusty kind of exploited them to be singing stars in the third act. But I've never done like a full-on, just all about Krusty episode. So that's what this one is.
Cool. Does that encompass Itchy and Scratchy as well? Then
there's no Itchy and Scratchy right now. There could be, but there's no Itchy and Scratchy element of it right now.
When we see that episode and Itchy and Scratchy's in, you got to give him props.
Yeah, right. Do I get $200 or something?
You
have to talk to the Screenwriters Guild. But they didn't invent the character. You guys did. So that doesn't work.
Yeah. But I love Itchy and Scratchy. My favorite episode of all time is the one with Poochie, Itchy, Scratchy, and Poochie. That is my favorite.
Yeah, I just saw that the other day. I was watching, because FXX runs Simpsons like 24/7 now. And
we just finished the marathon, yeah.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's so great. I don't know if you guys catch it at all on FX, but it's like just runs all the time.
I didn't happen to, but
yeah. In case you didn't know, FXX runs like Simpsons forever.
So Michael, what projects are you working on now besides Simpsons, other than Simpsons?
Well, Simpsons, and then I have a show on Netflix called F is for Family that I co-created with the great Bill Burr, the most amazing stand-up comedian in the world. And the greatest guy ever. And our first season is on Netflix right now. It came out about a year ago, but it just lives on Netflix. You can watch it anytime. And we are in the middle of making the second season right now, 10-episode second season that will be coming out sometime next year. So The Simpsons has very, very nicely let me sort of take like a hiatus or kind of a sabbatical away from The Simpsons for a little while to work on this show. And now I'm back at The Simpsons while the second season of Her Family is being produced and being animated and like that. So that'll be coming on. That'll be coming out like I said, like around springtime of next year.
How do they drop that? They drop that all in one big lump sum when it comes out, right?
Netflix, yeah. So that's 10 episodes. It'll all come out at once, and then you can watch them all at once if you like.
Sure, because these days everyone binge watches. Yeah, that's how it is. It's very different than it used to be, right? We'd have to wait a whole week.
I know.
Well, unless it was Batman.
I'm not sure. I mean, I like both things. I mean, the Netflix way of writing shows was interesting, and it was completely different from Simpsons. Even though it's an animated show, it's about a family. It's set in the 1970s, but that was a show where Netflix encouraged us to do their binge model of storytelling, which is that like one episode kind of leads into the next with kind of a cliffhanger, where they want you to sort of say, let's watch the next one, let's watch the next one, let's watch the next one. So that's been fun to do. A really interesting way of writing that I hadn't done before.
Well, you do a lot of episodical writing with the Simpsons now. This is a different
completely different, but really fun in that way. And that's the kind of stuff that I like to watch. Like I watch a lot of comedy, but I mostly watch like serialized dramas like Westworld, which just ended, and I was crazy really nice show. But there's something to do. There's something cool about. I think the binge model is great because another show we just watched, my wife and I just watched, is this one about Queen Elizabeth called The Crown that's on Netflix. That was really good. And we kind of binged through that in a couple of days. But Westworld was the kind of show where like you had to wait each week for it to come out, and like so that anticipation of like when's it going to come out, I think is very exciting. And you know, there's shows like that, the kind of shows that I really like that are come out on like the regular networks. Like I was really into like Sopranos and Mad Men, Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul. Those are the kind of shows. And the Americans is great, where you have to wait each week for it to come out, and that there's something great about that still.
There's a certain anticipation going, like, oh man, what it's that old phrase about the water cooler, talking about the episode around the water cooler the next day. There's a certain excitement behind that.
Yeah. The only show that I do like that now is The Walking Dead. Like I binge watch a lot of stuff, but The Walking Dead, I have to watch it live when it's on every week. You know, I wait for it. I wait for that anticipation. Yeah. You know, that type of thing. So. I'm curious, though, with Netflix and how that process works, how influential are they in the creative process, or do they just give you guys full reign? You know, was that commissioned by Netflix, or did you guys shop it around and Netflix picked it up?
We actually took it first to another place. We took it to Cartoon Network originally, and this was a couple years back before Netflix really was doing much. Like I think at the time when we first sold it, we first took it to Cartoon Network. I think Netflix maybe had one show. I think they had Orange is the New Black, I think was their first show, or House of Cards maybe. So we weren't anticipating it to be a binge type show. We thought it would be more like a Simpsons style in terms of like standalone episodes. And then we wrote an original pilot for Cartoon Network, and for various reasons, they decided not to go forward with it. So then we work with our production company. Is Vince Vaughn's production company. It's called Wild West Productions. Nice. So Vince Vaughn was sort of behind that, and he was very enthusiastic about the show. He's like, "This is not dead. We're going to take it to Netflix. You know, you'll see." And then he did take it to Netflix, and it just happened that Bill Burr already had a relationship with Netflix because he had done some stand-up specials for them, and so they had done very well. So it was a natural fit, and then they ordered it from there. And then they asked us to sort of make it in their style of writing. And by the time we wrote it, got the deal made, and it came out, by that time there were a bunch of shows on that. We were one of many shows on Netflix. Mm-hmm. And now there's like, I don't know, hundreds and hundreds of shows on Netflix, of which we are one. But they've been very great. They're very, very encouraging, very they sort of let us pretty much have free reign in many ways. So they give suggestions and talk about like, what if it was this, what if it was that, but very encouraging. And if anything, they were like, go further, like push the envelope. Because we were on Netflix, we didn't have to abide by any kind of network kind of censorship rules. So if you've seen F for Family, it's very R-rated in terms of language and things you see on the screen. And they were like, go for it, just go for it, just go crazy.
Bill Burr comedy. I mean,
yeah, I was gonna say, could Bill really live anywhere else other than Netflix? Because his style comedy, right? I mean, to be censored, I don't think it would
if
work.
They were on Cartoon Network with like even Adult Swim, where they push the envelope a little bit more at night, I would think that would be restrictive for you guys, considering his type of comedy.
It would have been. So I can't imagine that version of the show. I'm glad that it worked out this way, because Netflix has just been the perfect place for the show, and we've been so happy with them, and they've been very happy with us. So
how does, like, I see it now, the way writers mostly make it seems more rare for a writer to make it as a creator right off the bat. It seems like you have to be a writer for another show. You do your scripts.
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, it's a little bit different now than it used to be, only because of technology. But normally how it would work is like, you'd get like my sort of path was, you get staffed, like you get hired on as one of many writers on a writing staff, and then you sort of, establish yourself that way, and then maybe after you've worked on a couple of shows or you've got a couple things under your belt, then your agent feels like they can call up like an NBC network and say, like, this guy wants to come pitch you a new show because he's worked on this show for a couple of years. So that's the way it always did work. It still kind of works that way, but now, like there's a number of shows that are on there, like Broad City, which started out as a web show. Those two women like just created their own web show, and it's so funny that Comedy Central said we're going to turn it into a TV show. So I mean that still happens a little more than it. Definitely that wouldn't have happened 20 years ago before the internet. So, but it's still sort of that way of like sort of you have to sort of establish yourself a little bit in the business, and then before you can sort of just walk in the door of like an NBC or HBO and say, here's the show I want to do.
One thing we didn't get to yet, and it's a pretty big deal for us, is the Lego Star Wars series that you've written. Yeah. We're huge Star Wars fans. Me too. We're going to Rogue One together. Like, we're all going to watch that. So you executive produced these series and the TV specials. One of them being the Yoda Chronicles, which was huge. I know Joe has seen that with his son. Tell us about that experience and what was developing those like.
That was incredible. I mean, I've always been a big Star Wars fan. Huge, going back to 1977, when the first movie came out. So, it just sort of worked out that way that, Lego had done these video games, the Lego Star Wars video games, and they have little cutscenes in them that would be little funny, like 2 or 3 minute shorts. And they decided they wanted to try to make it into a full 22-minute special. And they kind of went out to a bunch of writers, and they knew about me a little bit because I had came close to working on another Star Wars related comedy show that was called Detours. That was it's kind of the great unseen Star Wars comedy show that was produced by the guys that make Robot Chicken, Seth Green and Matt Enright. And that's a huge hell of a story for another day. But like they made this amazing show that is still sort of sitting on the shelf right now. After the sale between Lucas and Disney, they decided to sort of like hold that show off. So, but anyway, I met with those guys about that, but I couldn't end up doing it. But they knew me, they knew my work, so they recommended me to the Lego people, and they asked a bunch of writers to write in ideas for what would be a funny Lego Star Wars special. Just come up with any idea. And so it was kind of blind. I didn't know who I was competing against, but I came up with this idea that turned out to be the very first one, which was called the Padawan Menace, which was about a bunch of kids on a field trip who, during the Clone Wars times, the prequel times, go on a field trip to the Senate and get embroiled in this adventure with Yoda and the Emperor and General Grievous and all these characters and Jabba the Hutt and all that stuff. And so they liked that, and they hired me to write that story. So I wrote that one, which became the first special. And they decided they wanted to do a second one, and they asked me to do a second one. And that second one was called The Empire Strikes Out. And so that one I decided to sort of make it more in like Luke Skywalker time. So that was really fun. And then they decided they wanted to do a series of like 3 or 4 in a row. So that was the first one was called the Yoda Chronicles. And there was one called the New Yoda Chronicles. And then there was one called Droid Tales, which was the last big series that I worked on. That was a 5-episode series. That was the most fun because that was our Lego version of all the 6 original movies, like sort of a retelling of the 6 original movies in Lego.
So where do all those live? Where can people go see those now?
I think the Droid Tales and the New Yoda Chronicles were produced for Disney XD, so they may still be able to see them on like the Disney XD app. I think they're probably available on iTunes. The last thing I did for them right now, I haven't worked on anything for them for a little while, but I did some stuff last year. It's these little shorts that were called The Resistance Rises that were kind of little mini kind of prequels to The Force Awakens. So those are out there too, I think. If you can find those probably on YouTube even or on the Lego website or on Disney XD. But those are really fun to do because I got to have a kind of a sneak peek at like the script of The Force Awakens because we were writing these shows in the dark because the movie didn't exist yet, but we had to write stuff based on it. So they let me come into an office at Disney Studios and sit in a closed room and read the screenplay.
Probably sign away your life if you ever talked about it. Right?
Yeah. So they were talking about like Raftars and things like that before nobody knew what they looked like or what they were, but we sort of had to go on faith, like they're big, ugly, horrible, scary things. Okay, that's what the Raftars. Or like Maz Kanata, like nobody knew what she even looked like. Even at the time they were working on the film, they hadn't quite figured out what she was going to look like. So it was really interesting and fun to work on that.
That's funny. I have a fun fact for everybody. I don't know, being that you're a comedy writer, I don't even know if the guys here have seen this before. There was a 1978 short film parody called Hardware Wars. Have you ever seen that, Michael?
Yeah.
I mean, when you
one of the first like Star Wars parodies, I think probably.
it was Augie Ben Doggy and all the great characters that were in there, and I figured you must have known it because of the way you write and the snark and all that. Have you guys seen this?
I haven't seen it. No.
Well, we're gonna have to.
Well, I'll tell you something. I'll tell you an interesting story. Is that like back in the late '90s, '99 or so, '99 2000, I was working at Disney on an animated show for them. Called Teacher's Pet, and these two young guys had been hired by Disney to develop some animated shows, and they were really young, they were really fresh and really funny, great guys, and they were really into Star Wars, and they brought in a VHS tape, which DVDs didn't even exist yet, I don't think, of the holiday special, the Star Wars holiday special, and the one with Life Day and everything, which is really terrible. But we laughed at that really hard. And they also brought in, there's one called Troopers, which was like a parody of Cops with stormtroopers. If you look for that on YouTube, you'll see that's like one of the first really great Star Wars parodies. And they were totally fun guys. They were like, oh, these guys are hilarious. They're great, and we got along pretty well. And then they were Phil Lord and Chris Miller, who are now directing the Han Solo movie, who did the Lego movie and everything like that. But even then, I knew them when they were whenever that was 15, 16 years ago, but they were really even then they were completely into Star Wars. And so I've been very happy to see that they're now making the Han Solo movie.
Nice.
Congratulations again on renewing for season 2 of F is for Family. We know how hard it is to renew. I hope everybody listening to this episode goes and checks it out for sure. Thanks so much for your time today, Michael. This was a blast for us. It was a true look into our childhoods and getting to ask you a whole bunch of fun questions. So I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll talk to you soon.
We wish you the best.
Mike. Thanks so much. All right, take care. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye, Michael.
Bye.